On amplifiers, how do they work and what are the different kinds? Amplifiers have transformed entertainment, astronomy, search and rescue, medical diagnostics, and every human endeavor where some physical change can be converted into an electrical signal. Power amplifiers come in multiple classes, each for specific applications. The amplifier remains a transformative innovation for being able to receive the human voice and boost it so thousands of people can hear it at once. Without the microphone, politics itself may have evolved differently. The device has been ubiquitous in everything from the public protest to political rallies. Amplifiers have been transformed entertainment, astronomy, search and rescue, medical diagnostics in every human endeavor where some physical change can be converted to an electric signal. For simplicity's sake, let's focus here on audio signals. A microphone is a type of transducer, a device that converts energy in one form to another. In this case, from sound to electrical, there are different microphones for use in specific context, varying in terms of how they collect sound energy and how they convert it into electric signals. Microphones in telephones and voice recorders are also condenser microphones because they use capacitors to transduce audio signals. Condenser is an old name for capacitor. A microphone is a type of transducer, a device that converts energy in one form to another, in this case from sound to electrical. There are different microphones for different use in specific context, varying in terms of how they collect sound energy and how they convert it to electric signals. Microphones in telephones and voice recorders are also called condenser microphones because they use capacitors to transduce audio signals. Condenser is an old name for capacitor. A simple capacitor consists of two plates facing each other, separated in between by an air gap or any suitable dielectric material, but connected on either side to a common circuit, including a power source. As the current enters one plate and builds up, it becomes depleted from other. The difference creates an electric field between plates that stores energy within the dielectric medium. The ability of a capacitor to store energy is called capacitance. The condenser microphone replaces one of the plates with a vibrating diaphragm. When a person speaks into the microphone, diaphragm vibrates, altering the capacitance, which is converted to audio signals. Once the audio signal is available, it is transported to a preamplifier or preamp. Say there is an audio signal in the form of varying voltage. A preamp will acquire the voltage and supply it with more energy from an external power source while minimizing the noise. The ratio of output of this process to the input is called preamp's gain. The key to minimizing noise is a step called impedance matching. Impedance is the measure of how much a given circuit resists or impedes the flow of electric current in a direct current circuit. The impedance is equal to the resistance. During impedance matching, the impedance of the preamp circuit is matched to that of the circuit that emitted the audio signal. If there is a mismatch, the signal will become noisy, reducing the preamp's gain. The amplification itself is performed by by an active component like the transistor. How a voltage amplified. A bipolar junction NPN transistor consists of a base collector and an emitter. First, the small incoming voltage is applied between the base and the emitter, that is, the transistor is forward biased such that electrons flow out of the emitter. The base is configured so that most of the electrons diffuse into the collector, leading to a large collector amount. In a typical transistor, the collector current is at least 50 times higher than the base current. Next, the collector is supplied with a high voltage from an external source, like a battery through a resistor. When the current collector current flows across the resistor, it creates a strong voltage. This voltage, when measured at the collector, is the output voltage, that is amplified version of the input signal. A signal can be drawn as a sinusoidal wave. An amplified signal will have the same shape but bigger, in this case meaning the voltage swing will be higher. A bipolar junction transistor, NPN transistor, base collector emitter. First, the small incoming voltage is applied between the base and emitter, that is, if the transmitter is forward biased such that electrons flow out of the emitter. The base is configured so that most of the electrons diffuse into the collector, leading to a large collector current. In a typical transistor, the collector current is at least 50 times higher than the base current. Next, the collector is supplied with a high voltage from an external source like a battery through a resistor. When the collector current flows across the resistor, it creates strong voltage. This voltage, when measured at the collector, is the output voltage, that is amplified version of input signal. A signal can be drawn as a sinusoidal wave. An amplified signal will have the same shape but bigger, in this case meaning the voltage swing will be higher. Before the preamplified signal goes to a loudspeaker, it also passes through driver and power stages. The driver stage uses transistors to keep the voltage constant while increasing the current, while the power stage further increases both the voltage and the current. Power amplifiers comes in multiple classes, each for specific applications. Class A and B amplifiers are used in basic sound systems and small studios. Home theaters and more intensive use cases prefer Class AB amplifiers. Antennae emitting radio frequency signals at a single carrier frequency use Class C amplifiers, whereas public announcement speakers use Class D amplifiers. Some of these groups have subclasses that, while sharing many of the same features, deviate in particular ones, like being able to handle very high power or enabling high frequency signals. The loudness of sound produced at the loudspeaker is a function of the power of the input signal. The loudspeaker has three basic components: voice coil, external magnets, and diaphragm. Voice coil, external magnet, and a diaphragm. Voice coil is a coil of wire placed within the magnet. When the input voltage is applied across the wire, a large current is produced, which in turn produces a strong magnetic field around the coil. The field interacts with that of the external magnet, causing the coil to move as the input voltage varies. The coil is connected to the diaphragm, and the coil's motion vibrates diaphragm membrane, producing the sound. The higher the power of the input signal, the louder the sound produced by the diaphragm. To further enhance this process, external magnetic field is made stronger, the diaphragm larger, and input signal more powerful. Loudspeakers can also be built with smaller diaphragms with fast-moving membranes to facilitate high-frequency sounds and larger diaphragms to facilitate low-frequency ones. The 67th annual Grammy Awards took place on February 3. Her alter ego is Sasha Fierce. When she was a child, her father made her run while singing so that she would not become exhausted while performing on stage. She made history at the 2023 Grammy Awards and again this year. Which genre of music was not recognized at the Grammy Award ceremony until 1989? This poet, lyricist, author, and director was born at the Jhelum district of the present-day Pakistan. He is known by his pen name. His daughter is a filmmaker. Name this man who won a Grammy Award in 2010 as well as an Academy Award. Is it A.R. Rahman? Does he have a daughter? I don't know. This song was well written and sung more than a quarter of a century ago. Using machine learning, the song was crafted from the singer's demo and released in 23. It won a Grammy this year. What is the name of the song and famous band that won the Grammy Award? He won the Pulitzer Prize for Music a few years ago. His stage name used to be K. Dot, who is the singer who swept all the five categories for which he was nominated this time. The woman in this photo is seen receiving a Grammy Award. It was her husband's anti-war speech that won him award posthumously. Name the woman, her husband, and the man presenting the award to her. Next, how will the government produce required fuel ethanol? Does India's ethanol distillery industry have the capacity to produce nearly 1100 crore liters of fuel ethanol? Why have maize imports increased substantially in the past year? Union Minister Nitin Gadkari said India will achieve its target of 20% ethanol blending of petrol in the next 2 months, at least an year ahead of what was originally planned. This would entail the production of nearly 1100 crore liters of fuel ethanol in 1 year. The 1100 crore liters of fuel ethanol will come from sugar and high grade molasses, Food Corporation of India rice, broken rice, and maize. India's ethanol distillery capacity has ramped up to 1600 crore liters, driven by a range of government incentives and a promise of stable, lucrative market. Sugar is expected to provide some 400 crore liters this ethanol year, according to Deepak Balani, Director General of Indian Sugar and Bioenergy Manufacturers Association. India had closing sugar stocks of around 80 lakh tons in October 24. The projected sugar production for next year is around 315 lakh tons, out of which 40 lakh tons will go to fuel ethanol. Mr. Bilani said ethanol for non-fuel uses will come from low-grade molasses called C-heavy that don't go into sugar production. Sugar is expected to provide 400 crore liters of ethanol this ethanol year, according to Deepak Manali, Director General of Indian Sugar and Bioenergy Manufacturers Association. India had closing sugar stocks of around 80 lakh tons. In October 24, the projected sugar production for the next year is around 315 lakh tons, out of which 40 lakh tons will go for fuel ethanol. Ethanol for non-fossil fuel will come from low-grade molasses called C-heavy that don't go into sugar production. The government recently decided to reduce the price of FCI rice to distilleries from 28 to 22.5 per kg. The government handout states that some 110 crore liters of ethanol will be produced from FCI rice this ethanol year. This means almost 400 crore liters of fuel ethanol should come from maize. For context, India was producing little or no ethanol from maize until 2020. Besides pure play grain based distilleries coming up, some sugar distilleries have modified the dual feed so in the off season they can use feedstock to produce ethanol. India's maize production is just about enough for traditional needs such as for the poultry sector, livestock feed, starch production, and some 10% of the human consumption. As the government had imposed curbs on allowing sugar and high quality molasses on ethanol production, maize imports started ramping up in April 24. From April to June, approx 100 crore worth of maize was imported, while for 23-24 maize imports were approx $33 million. Ministry of Commerce figures show that total of 188 million worth of maize was imported from April to November 24. The promise of a steady, lucrative and ethanol market has meanwhile graded many farmers to take maize cultivation across India. The major maize producing states are Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, Andhra, Rajasthan, Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. For the 24-25 ethanol year, Maize output would be some 42 million tons, out of which 9 million would can go towards producing 350 to 400 crore liters of ethanol. HS Chart Director ICAR said. India's maize production is just about enough for traditional needs such as poultry sector, livestock feed, starch production, and some 10% for human consumption. As the government has imposed curbs on allowing sugar and high quality molasses for ethanol production, maize imports started ramping up. From April to June, approx 100 crore worth of maize was imported, while 23-24 maize imports were approximately $33 million. Ministry of Commerce figures show that a total of $188 million worth of maize was imported from April to November. The promise of a steady, lucrative ethanol market has meanwhile goaded many farmers to take maize production. The major maize producing states are Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra, Bihar, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. For the 24-25 ethanol year, maize output would be some 42 million tons, out of which 9 million can go towards producing the 350 to 400 crore liters of ethanol. Since 2020-21, when ethanol production was almost all sugar-based, maize production has increased by nearly 6 million tons in 3 years. As things stand now, maize is cultivated in 10% more area at a higher yield, says Mr. Jat, who also expects some diversion from traditional maize uses since supplying to ethanol is more lucrative for farmers. On whether that won't disrupt the market, Mr. Jat says DDGS distillers dried grains with solubles, a byproduct of ethanol, can be used for poultry. The long term sustainability of fuel ethanol would depend on whether the switch to ethanol and stress on maize has been negative impact on production of other food grains. Mr. Jat estimates that 100 crore liters of fuel ethanol translates to 6,000 crore savings on oil imports and the money going into the internal economy, including to farmers. For context, India's yearly oil import bill is some 10.5 lakh crore. Union Minister Nitin Gadkari said India will achieve its target of 20% ethanol blending of petrol in the next 2 months. Sugar is expected to provide some 400 liters of ethanol this year. As the government had imposed curbs on allowing sugar and high quality molasses, maize imports started ramping up in April 24. Worth in 2000 notes still out in public despite withdrawal, 6,500 crore. RBI said 98% of the 2000 denomination banknotes have been returned since they were withdrawn from circulation. The facility for deposit or exchange was available at all bank branches till October 7, 23. New railway stations being constructed in Jharkhand, 57, 7,000 crore to accelerate the development of railways in the state. Number of people killed in car bomb explosion in Syria. All but one of the deceased were women. No group immediately claimed responsibility. It was seventh car bomb explosion in Manbij in over a month. Manbij in northeastern Aleppo continues to witness violence even after the downfall of Bashar Assad. Share of electric vehicles from total vehicles sold in Norway 96%, an unparalleled number in the world and close to country's goal of selling only zero emission vehicles as of this year. Number of protesters in a rally in Berlin against the far right, 1.6 lakh demonstrators has turned out to denounce the breach by a Christian Democratic Union of Germany's unwritten agreement not to work with the far right at the national level in place since World War II. Delhi's gender budget, its decline and impact when freebies and cash transfers just before the election can bring the immediate relief to families What the women voters of Delhi really need are concrete steps that can enable systematic growth in economic and social empowerment of women. There are 71 lakh women voters in Delhi, which is nearly half of the total electorate. Further, women have a high turnout rate as well, so it is no surprise that all contesting parties provide incentives tailored towards women. These incentives then come to light through the budget. Over the last decade, the overall budget for Delhi has increased from $271 billion to $760 billion. But how over the last decade, the overall budget for Delhi has increased from $271 billion to $760 billion. But how much of this budget is reserved for women? Overall, the gender budget of Delhi has witnessed a sevenfold increase from rupees 10 billion to 71 billion in 24-25. While providing financial assistance to women and child development, it is essential to reduce the gender gap. It is equally important to invest in other components like education and health. Investments in education have multiplier effects and lead to long term benefits by generating a highly literate and skilled workforce for the country. Education of women, particularly, can bridge the gender gap in employment and achieve wage parity. What is needed is not freebies but concrete steps that can enable systematic growth in economic and social empowerment of women. The neglect towards education of women by Delhi is concerning. The spending on women's education in gender budget stood at $2 billion in 2011-12, which increased to $18 billion in 24-25. This budget reached its peak in 2017-18, touching $24 billion rupees 24 billion rupees. The neglect towards education of women in Delhi is concerning. The spending on women's education in the gender budget stood at $2 billion, again dollars, 2 billion rupees in 2011-12, which increased to 18 billion rupees in 24-25. This budget reached its peak in 2017-18, touching 24 billion. Since then, the budget allocated for women's education has steadily declined. For the last 5 year education budget has reported a negative growth, with exceptions for 2019 and 23-24. Another surprising fact is that the education budget made up of 54% of the gender budget in 2017-18 but steadily declined to a mere 27% in 24-25. Concerningly, there were massive decline of 9% in the education budget in just the past 1 year. The decrease is not just in the share but also in the amount allocated to education, indicating that cash transfers and freebies have been the focus of gender budgets. Education and technical training are major pillars for sustainable long-term growth. A lack of investment in education sector can have negative spillovers into the l- labor market. According to PLFS, compared Compared to the national average of 45.2%, the least labor force participation stands at 20%, 21%, lowest in India. While most people in Delhi hold regular salaried jobs according to PLFS, most women are working as house helps or cleaners and men as shopkeepers or salespeople. Clearly, women are working in the lowest end of the skills spectrum. These jobs offer poor pay and low standard of living. Thus, low investments in female education lead to relatively small female workforce, lower skill levels, and low paying jobs. Secondly, the lack of skilled women workforce can also lead to higher gender inequalities in the labor force. As of 23-24, the gender gap in the labor force participation for Delhi stands at 51.6 percentage points. Moreover, the gender gaps in top roles, legislators, senior managers, and CEO is stark. with 94% of these positions held by men. Women also underrepresented in high-skilled jobs such as technicians and associate professionals. Of the 3.8% of the female labor force in these jobs compared to 10% of the male labor force. This points to the fact that investments in education are needed to bridge the gap in the high skilled workforce. Third, the lack of technical and professional education of women has led to the concentration of women in certain fields. Most women professionals are in the teaching and health sector. It is crucial, therefore, to promote technical education training and professional courses among women to close the gender gaps in various sectors. Cash transfers are necessary for relief, but for empowerment of women, education and training are of utmost importance. Improving the budget for women's education would greatly reduce the gap in the long run. While providing financial assistance to women and child development is essential to reduce the gender gap, it is equally important to invest in other components like education and health. The budget allocated for women's education in Delhi has steadily declined. For the last 5 year education budget has reported a negative growth with the exceptions for 2019-20 and 23-24. The lack of technical and professional education of women has led to concentration of women in certain fields. Most women professionals are in the teaching and health sector. The cause and effects of US's withdrawal from WHO survey results indicate a growing negative sentiment among Americans towards global public health body. Signing his first batch of executive orders following his return to White House, Donald Trump announced the US's withdrawal from the WHO. Mr. Trump accused WHO of being biased towards China as mishandling the COVID-19 pandemic. This is not the first time Mr. Trump has chosen to withdraw from WHO. He took steps to leave the organization in 2020 for the same reason. However, Joe Biden decided to continue the partnership. Close to 45% of Americans agreed with Mr. Trump's assessment back in 20 according to Global Attitude Survey conducted by the Pew Research Center. In 24 survey by Pew, close to 40% of US citizens said that the country was not benefiting at all. WHO's major As per the latest executive order, the US will pause the future transfer of any fund, support, or resources to WHO. This is massive blow to WHO as the US is its largest contributor. The US has consistently contributed to 15% of WHO's total funding since at least 2016-17. Its share dipped to 8-9% in 2020-21 when COVID-19 was at peak, but went again to the usual levels in the post-pandemic years. It's co- it's contributed a record $1.2 billion in the biennium period of 22-23. WHO's other major contributors in the latest year 24-25 includes the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Gavi Alliance and European Union Commission and the World Bank. The share of contributions from China accounted for 3%. Will some other countries step up the financial vacuum left by the US? Those are big shoes to fill as no country's contribution has exceeded 5% of the total funding received by WHO. Among countries, Germany and UK are in distant second and third place respectively as per the latest data. Chart 5 shows how funds from the US are being utilized by WHO. In 24-25, close to 26% of the funds were used to improve access to quality health services globally, 21% to respond rapidly to acute health emergencies, 20% for polio eradication, and close to 10% for prevention of epidemics and pandemics. In Jammu and Kashmir's development projects are leading to ecological ruin and displacing people. The government's ambitious proposals to construct highways and develop satellite townships in Jammu and Kashmir have led to fear among the locals who feel that these projects could disrupt the region's delicate ecological balance. In 21, government approved a semi-ring road project and acquired 900 acres of cultivated agricultural land for it. The district is the most affected by this project is Budgam, followed by Pulgama, Srinagar, etc. Ganderbal, Bandipora, and Baramulla. This mega project aimed at reducing traffic in the Kashmir Valley will be implemented in two phases. Farmers worry about their livelihoods as thousands of apple, plum, and pear trees have already been axed to clear the land for construction of the new highway, which locals fear will be used for security and tourism purpose alone. The project will feature numerous infrastructure elements including 290 culverts, two road overbridges, two flyovers, 10 major junctions, etc. Jammu and Kashmir is predominantly an agrarian economy. More than 80% of population is directly or indirectly associated with agriculture. The mass acquisition of land has exerted tremendous pressure on the land resources of J&K, which had some of the smallest land holdings in the country. The landowners were not compensated adequately for the loss of their land. This is because they received compensation not under the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition Rehabilitation Act 2013, but under the Jammu and Kashmir Land Acquisition Act 1934, which was removed from the statute books after dilution of Article 370. In Jammu and Kashmir's rural economy, commercial apple farming and its value chain is the mainstay of the economy. This generates an estimated revenue of 1500 crore. Transforming such fertile lands into construction sites will be disastrous for the region's economy. In May 22, a notification under the Jammu and Kashmir Town Planning Act 1963 imposed a moratorium on land transactions with 500 meters of the ring road. However, in October 24, Housing Board announced a notification plans for establishing 30 satellite townships along the semi-ring road. Each township will cover an average area of 200 hectares, requiring a total of 6,000 hectares, most of which is agricultural land. These settlements risk displacing people and leaving marginal farmers landless. A significant portion of the land has already been acquired, and more land is expected to be acquired soon. Ever since Jammu and Kashmir became a union territory, there has been a thrust on development. The government has either proposed new proposals or given a fillip to already commissioned projects, which has been languishing due to paucity of funds. The unrestrained march of infrastructure development in the region is leading to ecological ruin and social displacement. While the government has promised enhanced connectivity and economic progress, these projects strike at the heart of the region's fragile ecosystem and hurt its agrarian backbone. The destruction of agricultural lands and orchards will strip the region of its biodiversity, displace wildlife, and erode its green cover. Construction activities will accelerate soil erosion, rendering land infertile and crippling agricultural output. Jammu and Kashmir has 14.3 lakh farming households and an average of land holding of just 0.25 hectare, contributes 80% of India's temperate fruit production, yet massive land acquisitions for infrastructure projects often carried out without robust social impact assessment are dismantling these livelihoods. Calamities such as 2014 floods have laid bare the ecological fragility of the region. The blind pursuit of urbanization and relentless push for building highways, railways, and satellite townships heightens the risk of such disasters. Eliminating elitism in the mental health, the Ministry of Labour and Employment in its end-year review report for 24 stated that all states and union territories are expected to complete the process of harmonization and pre-publication of draft rules for new labour codes by March 31, 2025. This provides an efficient window for government to consider the incorporation of provisions that create a liability-based framework to ensure that mental health of workers, especially those in blue-collar category. 24. For the first time, mental health was acknowledged as an impactful driver for the individual and national development. In the Economic Health Survey, the survey also noted that 10% of adults suffered from mental disorders, with the treatment gap ranging between 70 to 90%. The World Health Organization, in its fact sheet on mental health at work, outlines several risks, including excessive workloads, a rapid work pace, long unsocial and inflexible hours, unsafe or poor physical working conditions, job insecurity, inadequate pay, conflicting home work demands. These risks primarily impact blue collar workers due to their demanding jobs, unsafe work environments, and lack of adequate legislative and policy protections. The time has come for the government to address the challenge of increasing elitism in the field of mental health and well-being of workers, highlighting the significant disparity between blue collar and white collar employees. First, in the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020, Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020, the concept of occupational safety is limited to physical safety in the course of employment. This implicit excludes mental well-being and safety norms from the perspective preventive nature. For example, Section 6, Clause 1, Subclass D uses the phrase as far as the reasonably practicable while creating a mandate for the employer to provide working environment that is safe without any health risk. Defining the ambit of this phrase is left to the central government, which will notify it from time to time. Moreover, its conjoint reading with sections 23 and 24 of the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Condition Code provides a narrow connotation of health. Second, as per the definition of employment injury under the Section 2 subclass Section 2 Class 28 of the Code on Social Security, read with third schedule, employee can claim compensation under Section 74 of the Code on Social Security only if personal injury is caused by an accident or an occupational disease arising out and in course of employment. The third schedule, lower and less diseases arising out of mental strain. Third, some major companies and make substantial efforts to enhance the well-being, work-life balance, mental health of the white-collar employees. The HAIL Health Assistance and Lifestyle Enrichment Program by Infosys, Wipro's Mitra Initiative and Employees Assistance Program by Tata Consultancy Services are some examples. Telemanus initiative bridges the gap between its scholars and mental health professionals, but its functionality requires beneficiaries to voluntarily make the distress call to the helpline number. The lack of awareness about such initiatives among the blue collar workers, coupled with the inherent hesitation to take any step, dilutes the objective. Way forward to realize the goal of Satyamev Jayate to Shramev Jayate, as the Prime Minister envisioned in 2014, mental health of blue-collar workers ought to be given due precedence. First, the rights and duty-based legislative framework that balances employers' right to get the job done with the concomitant duty to provide a safe and healthy work environment. Second, the list of occupational diseases under the third schedule of the CSC calls for legislative attempt to provide a holistic coverage of diseases arising from mental strain attributed to employment. Third, the upcoming labor codes have the opportunity to create a tripartite relationship between the employers, blue-collar workers, and mental health specialists. Fourth, amidst multiple statements made recently by reputed CEOs regarding 70 to 90-hour work weeks, emphasizing quantity over quality and well-being, the government must take steps towards forging a sustainable work environment for blue-collar workers. Government initiatives such as telemanus must be statutorily imposed on employers. Lastly, blue-collar workers also need to be acknowledged as stakeholders in mental health discourse. A closer look at the budget. The budget's announcement of increasing the personal income tax exemption limit has been projected as a relief for the middle class. However, while it may benefit a fraction of the population, the story lies in the larger economic reality. The so-called relief benefits only a minuscule segment of taxpayers, while the vast majority of Indians, including low-income groups, remain untouched by any direct relief. The poor and lower middle class populations who barely earn enough to sustain themselves end up paying more in indirect taxes on essential goods and services. If the government truly intends to provide relief to the common man, the focus must shift towards rationalizing GST rates on essential goods, particularly food items, medicines, utilities, rather than presenting superficial tweaks in the income tax slabs that benefit only a select few. A progressive tax structure coupled with GST reforms that shield the economically weaker sections is the only way to ensure equitable taxation. It is high time that the tax policies prioritize inclusive growth rather than optics that favor the limited population segment. Populism can be fiercely competitive when it comes to poll oriented freebies because all parties indulge in this culture of giving away what is taken by the way of taxes from the rich and the middle classes. It hardly needs to be reminded that the present dispensation has been voted in thrice largely on account of a northern Indian bias. India government has stopped patting itself on the back for the rise in the exemption limit for the income tax, with the finance minister also saying she had a tough time convincing the bureaucrats in her ministry. This is pure balderdash. We heard the voice of the middle class, says Nirmala Sitharaman. It is not so much the voice of the middle class that influenced the decision of the finance minister, but the Delhi elections. The voice of the middle class has been a cry in the wilderness in all the budget presented by the NDA so far. The kind of jobs is needed for the Viksit Bharat goal. The union budget has been presented, and this is the right time to outline the three kinds of jobs this writer believes India must create. Beyond reviving private consumption in urban areas, we must continue to strengthen long term job creation and real wage growth across India. The 24 budget has introduced employment linked incentives under the Prime Minister's 5 scheme initiative designed to create over 4 crore jobs over 5 years with a central outlay of 2 lakh crore. The Prime Minister's internship scheme saw significant traction in 24 with 6.21 lakh applications for 1.27 lakh opportunities. The outcomes on the rest four, beyond a draft cabinet note on ELI and meetings by DPIIT with the Ministry of Labour and CII, remain to be seen, but there must be more deliberation on the kind of jobs we wish to create for a Viksit Bharat. First, climate resilience. India was the seventh most affected country by the climate change in 2019, having suffered an income loss of $159 billion in 2021, and according to the Reserve Bank of India, will face adaptation cost of nearly $1 trillion by 2030. The impact of agricultural and labor productivity and also livelihoods require exponentially higher levels of funding for building rural and urban adaptation capabilities and rejuvenation of local ecosystems to boost job creation. To meet the net zero targets by 2070, the government must create incentive jobs and incentivize jobs which are climate resilient by maximizing all co-benefits IPCC. This could mean providing 3 to 4 state subsidized e-rickshaws in about 6 lakh villages to create about 2 million jobs focused on women drivers, also improving last mile mobility. Or there can be new ways to enable private investment in the compressed biogas plants to bridge the gap of 82 plants set up versus a target of 5,000 set in 2018, or even accelerating achieving 500 gigawatt non-fossil fuel energy capacity target to create over 1 million jobs with stronger support for decentralized and rooftop solar, which can be 7 times more labor intensive. So first is climate resilience. India was the seventh most affected country by climate change in 2019, having suffered an income loss of $159 billion in 2021, and according to RBI, will face adaptation cost of nearly $1 trillion by 2030. To meet the net zero targets, the government must create and incentivize jobs which are climate resilient by maximizing all co-benefits. This means providing 3 to 4 state subsidized e-rickshaws in about 6 lakh villages, 3 to 4 state subsidized e-rickshaws to create about 2 million jobs focused on women drivers, also improving last mile mobility. Or there can be new ways to enable private investment in compressed biogas plants to bridge the gap of 82 plants set up versus the target of 5,000 set in 2018, or even accelerating achieving 500 gigawatt non-fossil energy capacity target to create over 1 million jobs with stronger support for decentralized and rooftop solar, which can be seen 7 times more labor intensive. Second, artificial intelligence resilience. The rise of generative AI in numerous jobs have now 50 plus percent automation potential. Scenarios by McKinsey Global Institute show that 50% automation adoption in India can happen in the next 10 years. India's IT and business services, which comprise 70% plus of services export economic survey 21, hope to create millions skilled talent export, but their employment potential can be limited in the Gen AI era as labor gets costlier relative to capital. With launch of Meta GPT simulating software companies, AI writing 25% of Google's code, and layoffs due to chatbots even in India, new jobs will need to prioritize physical engagement and utilize our human creativity, which this writer terms as AI resilience. This can take the form of larger education and health budgets to plug the deficit of millions of healthcare professionals and teachers across states, or dedicated financing for national rural livelihood mission to facilitate global and urban market linkages of local products, crafts, and knowledge of farmers and artisans in rural India. Third, being aspiration centric. Despite their growing engagement with the startup culture, rural youth continues to have low confidence due to deeper insecurities from poor foundational education. This includes English and resource-deprived upbringing. This can reinforce dependency on government jobs and coaching to crack entrance exams, as their aspirations are shaped by the socio-economic backgrounds, digital media, and the interaction of Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, and the slow growth of non-farm job warrants of farm job creation, which responds to these dynamic aspirations. These can take the form of rapid infrastructure development, such as building around 70,000 integrated pack houses, plugging the 95% plus infrastructure gap to create over 2 million jobs, or boosting productivity and value addition for high import export share items and tech enabled local manufacturing of agri imports. Greater use of tech, social media, and rebranding the rural can also help make off-farm jobs aspirational for India's youth. One clear avenue is accelerating the national mission on edible oilseeds to reduce India's 57% import dependence on edible oil back to the pre-WTO levels with the revitalized rural processing of native oilseeds like soybean, sunflower, about 40% of edible oil imports, and boosting retail of in vogue cold pressed oils, enabling creation of many such large scale businesses with private public partnerships and investments can address economic aspirations of our disheartened youth protesting examination leaks and low recruitment vacancies. While tax reliefs may temporarily boost urban consumer demand, amidst growing household indebtedness and suboptimal private investment trends, the center can demonstrate greater commitment for long-term structural reforms, which create these climate resilient, AI resilient, and aspiration centric jobs. Climate resilient, AI is resilient, and aspiration centric jobs. Many opportunities exist as we embark towards our shared vision of a Viksit Bharat. Tariff turmoil. Donald Trump is triggering a trade war on unrelated bilateral issues. President Donald Trump set the cat among the pigeons globally when he introduced a slew of punishing tariffs on trade with Canada, Mexico, and China, with even more taxes promised on other trading partners in the months ahead. Markets in Japan, South Korea, and across Asia were rolled as fears peaked of the fallout of supply chains for North America, particularly in sectors such as automobiles, which have enjoyed a strong presence of foreign investment for decades. Over the weekend, Mr. Trump signed three executive orders that slapped Canadian and Mexican goods with a tariff of 25%. Only Canadian energy products were spared, 10% tax will be applied. The White House further announced, in line with promises Mr. Trump made on the campaign trail, a 10% tax on goods from China. Beijing responded angrily, saying it will file a lawsuit with the WTO, say against the US for wrongful practice, even as it said that it would take necessary countermeasures. While Ottawa and Mexico City warned that retaliatory tariffs would be coming soon, Mr. Trump's subsequent calls to Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum led to 1 month pause before the tariffs kicked in, and the White House appeared to strike a conciliatory note with Mr. Trump speaking to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as well. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump has suggested the EU was next in the firing line, even though UK appeared to win a modicum of a reprieve for issues with Washington. While tariffs are traditionally applied sparingly and mostly in cases of trade imbalances in context of artificial price barriers imposed by the one country and that impact its trading partners. The official reasoning supplied by Trump White House for its tariff plan was that it would serve to address the national emergency resulting from extraordinary threat posed by illegal aliens drugs, including deadly fentanyl. On one hand, this opens the floodgate to other nations retaliating to US tariffs and dampening world trade at a time when global economic growth prospects are precarious. The move also signals that it is acceptable for nations to weaponize tariffs as a countermeasure against the unrelated inter-country disputes. Few would deny Mr. Trump's administration the prerogative that it enjoys to crack down on the US ridiculous open borders, but most would have imagined that the process would entail intensified law enforcement activity rather than internecine tariffs. The tariffs will almost certainly have a deleterious effect on the prices that American consumers pay for imported products, besides a broader inflationary impact through higher input prices across the industries. Perhaps it will take a full 4 years of economic pain in the US before the realization dawns that tariffs are hardly a panacea to curb immigration and drug inflows. Some wind behind the sails of India's shipping industry. The government deserves credit for its commitment to develop a maritime sector largely neglected by predecessor governments. This is reflected in the expenditure on the government's flagship program, Sagarmala, which is on September 24 has outlined 839 projects requiring an investment of 5.8 lakh crore. Of these 241 projects, 1 lakh crore have been completed, 234 projects, 1.8 lakh crore implementation. Additionally, 364 projects are in various stages of development. Within Sagarmala, 2.91 lakh crore, 50% is allocated for post modernization, 2 lakh crore for port connectivity, 15,000 crore for port led industrialization, remaining 5% distributed between coastal community development infrastructure for coastal shipping, not ship acquisition and inland water transport. India's economy has seen GDP rising from 153 trillion in 2016 to 272 trillion in 22-23, an increase of 43%, growing at a CAGR of 7%. Despite 2 years of the COVID-19 related setbacks, the economy is projected to reach 3.7 trillion this year and 5 trillion by 2027 and 7 trillion by 2030. During this period, India's exempt trade has also grown from 66 billion dollars in 2016-17 to $166 billion in 2022, a cumulative increase of 77% and an annual growth rate of 12%. India aims to boost exports by $2 trillion by 2030 and to strengthen its global trade position. Despite high economic growth and increased investments in the maritime sector, the Indian shipping industry has remained stagnant according to the statistics by Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways. The cargo handled by major ports had marginally increased from 1 lakh million tons 1,000 million tons to 1,200 million tons in 2021, a cumulative growth of 14% on an annual increase of just 2.85%. In contrast, the number of vessels had declined by 5%. In terms of Indian registered ships, the number has increased from 1,300 to 1,500, a cumulative rise of 16% and an annual average annual growth of 2.4% over the same period. The gross tonnage has grown from 11 lakh gigaton to 13 lakh gigaton. Major concern has been the aging Indian fleet, with the average vessel's age rising to 26 years in 22-23. However, this has now improved to 21 years with the addition of 34 relatively younger vessels, average age of 14 years. In comparative terms, India's global ranking in ship ownership rank declined from 17 to 19, highlighting the need for reforms. In reality, India's shipping has continued to lose market to foreign flag vessels in carrying India's EXIM cargo and to rail and road transport for domestic cargo. The reason is simple: the needs for ship owners and shipbuilders are vastly different from those of port and terminal operators. India's shipping faces multiple challenges hindering its competitiveness: lack of capital and high borrowing costs, short loan tenures, and rigid collateral requirements requiring ship owners additional security instead of using ships as collateral, limited understanding of industry's cyclical nature, leading to inflexible loan restructuring policies and unfavorable taxation laws often favoring foreign flag vessels over Indian vessels even within Indian waters, delaying in repatriating funds for ship acquisitions, stringent regulatory requirements, additional financial burdens on mandatory training of Indian seafarers, higher port charges further eroding competitiveness. In contrast, ships registered in tax havens, flags of convenience, benefit from easier access to capital, lower borrowing costs, lenient regulatory standards, concealed ownership structures, etc. Beyond capital constraint, India's shipbuilding industry also struggles with inadequate infrastructure for constructing large vessels, high input costs, particularly on steel, a weak ancillary industry leading to dependency on imports, custom duty on imported machinery and spare parts, increasing production costs. Additionally, funding challenges for ship owners and delays in new building vessel deliveries deter potential buyers from investing in Indian shipyards, further weakening the domestic ships building sector. The Indian National Shipowners Association has for long advanced measures to ease capital constraints and eliminate discriminatory tax policies. Two key recommendations: creation of Maritime Development Fund and granting of infrastructure status to ships were incorporated into Maritime India Vision 2030. Additionally, industry stakeholders have been pushing for removal of 5% IGST on ship capital cost and exemption of Indian seafarers from tedious requirement. Except for tax-related relief, most of industry's long-standing demands appear to have been addressed. The government has announced a 25,000 crore MDF the infrastructure status of large vessels, facilitation of shipbuilding clusters, a 10-year extension for the basic customs duty exemption on shipbuilding spares and equipment, revamped financial assistance policy for shipbuilding, credit incentives for shipbuilding in Indian yards, and extension of tonnage tax scheme to inland vessels. However, the devil lies in the details. The government's contribution to the MDF Maritime Development Fund will only be 49%. with the remainder to come from major ports. It is unclear whether the 25,000 crore will be mobilized in a single year or over multiple years. Given the high capital intensity of shipping, shipbuilding, and port sectors, the amount may still fall short of industry needs. The aging Indian shipping fleet requires urgent replacement, and greenhouse gas reduction targets will necessitate investments in green technology. The sector requires long-term finances for with lower interest rates and repayment tenures of 7 to 10 years. Additionally, India needs new shipyards to build large vessels and expansion and modernization of existing ones. If the MDF is strategically utilized to attract external commercial borrowings at lower interest rates, it could help bridge the funding gaps across the maritime sector. The budget appears to have missed a crucial opportunity to address the tax disparities that to put Indian ships as a comparative disadvantage to foreign ships. Even when operating along the Indian coast, Indian flagged vessels are subject to 5% IGST on purchase price, a levy not imposed on foreign flagged ships. Additionally, Indian shipping companies must deduct TDS tax at source on seafarer salaries, where foreign vessels employing Indian seafarers face no such obligations. Budget 25 is promising step but must not become another half measure in the name of shipping reforms. The industry needs decisive action, not just incremental progress. Green and clean, India must formulate a critical minerals framework that is just and equitable. India has come a long way in its attempt to transition to cleaner forms of power in the past decade. This is partly reflected in the budgetary allocation to the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy between fiscal years 2015 budget estimates and 2025 budget estimates of 32,000 crore. But these allocations, other than in 2015 and 23, have been underutilized, leading to lower revised estimates. However, this does not fully reflect the clean energy journey. India attempted a major leap with PM Kusum scheme in 2019, a year ahead of the COVID-19 disruptions, with an outlay of 34,000 crore. The scheme envisaged having off-grid solar irrigation pumps and grid-connected solar plants on fallow farmlands, while PM Kusum has received a tepid response with less than half a gigawatt of installed capacity. The realization that energy transition is both a desirable outcome and a requirement occurred during the COVID-19 years when there were major supply chain disruptions to coal, oil, and gas. This led to India's pledging to produce half of its energy requirement from renewables in about 5 years from now at COP26 and 21. It was in 21 budget that heralded the clean energy shift with 18,000 crore for PLI scheme for advanced chemistry cell manufacturing to augment India's grid-scale battery storage capacity, a 4,500 crore PLI scheme for solar photovoltaic modules went up to 19,000 crore in 2022. But the government also decided to levy a 40% basic customs duty on solar modules and 25% on solar cells to reduce the overwhelming import dependence on China. However, this slowed solar panel installations nationwide, with prices rising, and even while renewables constitute 46% of India's total installed capacity, 70% of its power output is from coal. Experts have pointed to the need for grid-scale battery storage technology to augment India's renewable output, as intermittent renewable energy production leads to continued resilience on fossil fuel-based power. With the realization that steep BCDs could have inflationary and counterproductive to localizing production, particularly in the capital-intensive lithium-ion battery technology, the government has announced that it will exempt 12 critical minerals and 35 capital goods from BCDs. But reducing dependence on China for energy transition resources and technology would also require India showing leadership in formulating a critical minerals framework that is socially and environmentally just doing extraction and equitable during extraction and equitable in its distribution. With the US withdrawing its leadership position in these areas, India must aim to play a bigger role. So that's all in this one. See you in the next.